Welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Alison, and in this video I'm going to show you how to create this beautiful Merry Christmas bunting. Join me. Okay, so for our bunting we're using three colors. We're using red, white and green. I'm using a number 4 weight yarn. It's an acrylic yarn by Impeccable, a 5mm hook. You're also going to need a sewing tapestry needle to sew in your ends and a pair of scissors. So we're going to be making these our pennants. So a pennant is a triangular flag, so I'll be referring to them all as pennants from here on in. So you put a slip stitch on your hook and then you're going to chain 3 as the first stitch. So we're starting at the point of the pennant here. You're going to put 2 double crochets into the first chain, and I'm using the American crochet terminology here. That's the first one, and then the second one into that very first chain. So this will be the bottom point, and you've actually got 3 stitches on that very first row. So then for the second row we're going to chain 3 as the first stitch. This will be the first stitch in all the rows we're going to do. Then you're going to put 3 double crochets into the middle stitch from the row below. So there's the first one. 1, 2 and 3. So that's 3 into the 1 stitch, and then 1 double crochet into the last stitch on the row. So that will be the end stitch. That's row 2 finished. Then we're going to start row 3, and it will be 3 chain as the first stitch. Then this is where the pattern really starts. In your next stitch you're going to do 2 double crochets into the next stitch. So there's 1 and then 2, then 1 double crochet into that middle stitch, and then 2 double crochets into the next stitch. So your increases are the stitch in from either end. It's not the very last stitch, it's the one inside. So there's your second double crochet, and then finally 1 double crochet in that very last stitch on that row. So let's start the 4th row. We'll just go over it again. So it's chain 3 for the first stitch. Then you're going to put 2 double crochets into the next stitch. There's 1 and 2. Now you're going to put 1 double crochet into every stitch until the last 2 stitches. 1, 2 and 3. And in the second last stitch you're going to put 2 double crochets and then the final stitch will be in the last stitch. So you're increasing 1 double crochet at the end of at both ends of each row, and this is how the pattern will continue. So again you're starting with chain 3 for the first stitch. We'll just do it again. You're then going to put 2 double crochets into the next stitch. That's your first increase. Then you will put 1 double crochet into the next 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. It will always be an odd number. Then you're going to put 2 double crochet into the next stitch. That's your other increase at the other end. And then 1 double crochet into the final stitch. So now you've got the pattern. It's 3 chain to start, 2 double crochets, fill in all the other double crochets across the way to the second last, then it's 2 double crochets and then 1 single crochet. So you're going to continue like this increasing 2 stitches on every row, that's one at each end, for 13 rows. So I've just speeded it up a little bit there so you can see how each of the rows are going to unfold. And that's maintaining the shape. So what you actually end up with is this isosceles triangle, which has got that bottom point is 30 degrees. So it's giving a nice even sharp point at the bottom. It's not a equilateral triangle at all. You've got that 30-degree point at the end. And I'm just speeding it up there just to show you. Now clearly you could do your pennant smaller sizes if you wanted to do a smaller version of this, and that's entirely up to you. But you are going to create 13 rows, and at the end you will have, on the very last row, you will have a total of 27 stitches. So there's your 13 rows. What you're going to do is take your tapestry needle and weave in the ends. There's 2 ends, obviously the top end and the bottom end, and I like to weave my ends in as I go. I don't want to create a whole load of pennants and have to sew in the ends at the very end. That's overwhelming, so I always sew in my ends as soon as I make each piece. It's just easier way of working, and of course this is just a tip for you to do it that way. You want to make sure that you're not pulling as you're weaving it in. You just want to ease that yarn through, and really they're not going to come undone. So the idea is that you're going to create a total of 17 pennants, particularly because we're writing Merry Christmas, and you're going to do them in a variety of colors. You can see I've got the red, white and green there. It was quite a lighter green, and really it doesn't really matter. You can do your pennants in different colors, as long as when we're hanging them, we're going to do them so that they're in sequence, red, white, green, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But when we put it all together, that's where we get the bunting. So in total I made 6 red, 5 green and 6 white. And the main reason I only did 5 green was because I ran out of green, so that's how I did it. And you can then spell out the Merry Christmas, and we're going to be looking at the embroidery next. Now with the embroidery, I'm just going to really show you 3 letters. So first up is going to be the M, because the M is the widest letter that we're going to have. And I'm aligning my letters from 2 rows down and 6 rows up into a square. And the M letters actually cover 9 stitches. So I want to centralize, when I'm looking at my pennant, where this M is going to go. The M is a very special case because it's a far wider letter than all the others. So we're going to be embroidering the M over these stitches in this particular pattern, and it just helps to line yourself up with it. So I'll be doing the M, A and S on these last 3 pennants just to show you how to do the embroidery, because I think once you've done one, you've got the hang of it. So again, what I'm doing is I'm lining up. I want to make sure that I'm 2 rows down and I'm 6 rows up, and I'm counting in to find my central 9 stitches on that 3rd row. And I'll be inserting my needle right in the top left where that thumb is because I'm going to do the downward stroke now of the letter M. So with a contrasting yarn on your tapestry needle, you want to leave a tail behind of about I don't know, 3 inches or so, and then from the front you hold the yarn to the left. You put your needle in at the very top where the yarn came out, and then I'm placing it halfway down the stitch because I'm embroidering on top of one of the doubles, and I can get 2 chains over each stitch. Now ideally, when you're creating this embroidered chain stitch, you want to stay on line and go down the stitches for the vertical rows, and if possible you want to try and insert your tapestry needle between the yarn of the stitches, and you'll see that there are particular sort of gaps almost within the stitches because it's easier than sticking it through the middle of the yarn. You can't always do it this way, but if you can, it tends to make it easier. You can see there the needle is coming out through a gap between the yarn. So I can get 2 little chain stitches over each double crochet on each row. Now because we're crocheting down on the third row down, the third, fourth, fifth and sixth rows, you'll see that I'm actually able to line the letter up neatly. I'm not the best embroiderer, and honestly, chain stitches as far as I go with embroidering, but to do it this way is a great way to embellish your crocheting. So there I'm still checking. I need to be 6 rows from the bottom, 2 rows from the top, and I realize I've got just a couple more little stitches just to get the correct height to that down stroke. And when you're pulling the yarn through, don't over pull it, don't pull it too tight so that it twists the pennant. You want to ease this wool in. So I'm going to do that vertical, and I'm finished there, and then I'll put the needle below the loop through to the back and weave it in. Now in theory, you could, if you're doing an M, you could start at the bottom, go up, down, and do it all in one go, but I wanted to make sure that my chains in my embroidered chain are all really facing downwards. It's just easier, and it doesn't pull your cloth so much. So then I weave in both ends on that first downward leg, if you will, of the M. And at this point it really is critical to weave in your ends as you go, otherwise it'll be overwhelming at the end. I always weave my ends as I go. You can see it's a little snug there, but you want to ease that wool. You don't want it to pull the pennant. I mean, you want to make it look good, and then just trim those off. So now when we look on the front, we can see that we've got that first leg of the M. It's going on top of the double crochets, and then I will do the second leg of the M. I'm just making sure I'm at the right spot, again pulling it through, leaving a little tail to weave in with, and then stitching down on top of the double crochets that I'd made. It doesn't really matter what color you embroider your letter with on the pennant, because we've got 3 colors, red, white and green. So obviously in this case I'm putting white on the green, but then there are some other letters where I put red on the green, and it doesn't really matter. It's just how you'd like to do it. So just make sure that you've got both the same length, and then you're going to be weaving in those ends. The next thing we're going to be looking at is the 2 diagonal downwards, and we want to make sure that we get the central down valley centrally within the M. So it's actually that's where my finger is. That is my central stitch, and that's where I'm going to be aiming for. So again, you start at the top, working down with your chains. It just looks better when it's done this way, and you're aiming obviously diagonally down to that central point to make sure you're actually at the middle of the M, and then pull the thread through and then weave in the ends again. So yes, I realize if I'd done this all in one go, and perhaps as a beginner I would have just started at the bottom and gone up, down, but I just prefer the way that the chains flow when you actually work your chain stitch from the top down to the bottom. You can let me know what you think about that. Once you've got your 2 legs in and then you're working on the V, it's far easier to aim where you're going for, and so that the letter looks good at the end. Otherwise it can look a little bit twisted if you're not quite lined up properly. And again there with this, we've got how many? We've got ends. We've got 8 ends to sew in on just the M alone. That's why you really want to be doing it beforehand. Yeah. So there is the M finished. Now this is the only letter that goes across 9 stitches. As you're going to see now, as we move on to the other stitches, do not take up the 9 stitches. The width of the stitches in widths. All the other letters are now, as we're going to see now, we're actually going to put as 7 stitches. So we're doing the A, because we did the M, we're going to do the M, A and S. So we're going to be looking at the A. So the A is going to be, again, 2 rows down, 6 rows up, but it's only going to be 7 stitches wide, and you want to centralize yourself on that central stitch, because the point of the A will actually be on that central stitch in exactly these positions. So this is how all of the other stitches, all of the other letters are going to work out. You've just got to find the back position of where you're going and line yourself up as best you can. You know, it's not, it is, what would we call this, a Christmas craft thing. It's not high level embroidery. And thinking back to my earlier sewing classes at school, this would not have gone down well, but we're doing it this way because it's easy and it's fun, and you can make it the way you want it to be. Make sure that you've got your top A in the center. Make sure that you've got the foot of that A at the exact position it's supposed to be. And again, you're going to weave in the ends. You can see here clearly I've put the red on the white. I mean, again, I could have put the green on the white. It just depends. So you need to just remember that this letter is 7 stitches wide, so it's not as wide as the M, which is kind of interesting. Just we're even working out and realizing that M is the widest letter in the word Merry Christmas. And there are 2 of them, one for the Merry and one for the MAS. So I'm just finishing off the second leg of that A there, making sure I go right down to that bottom right hand position of that stitch. And again, weaving in the ends, which is great. It's really quite a good project. Then the horizontal bar of the A is going to go between a couple of the rows there. It's quite obvious where it needs to go, and of course you would do that sideways. This was a great project. I found I could make one of these pennants in about 45 minutes. So over a couple of evenings, well, probably a week of evenings, I just worked on the pennants, not really doing creating the pennants first, and just in the variety of colors. And I could do that watching TV of an evening. So it's a great project. And certainly if you got time before Christmas, it makes sense to work on it as soon as possible. The next letter we're going to be doing is the S in the Christmas, and this is a wiggle letter clearly, but again this takes up 7 stitches across. So you need to have a close look at this, and you can certainly stop the video at this point if you want to make sure to see where to start your S. We're going to start in that top right hand edge of the S, but it's coming further down, and then we have to swoop the S round. It's a little tricky, but you're going to manage. It's going to be great. And then make sure that you're curving around the center bit in the middle. And I actually ran out of yarn at this point because you can only use a certain length. You don't want to have your yarn too long, otherwise it gets ragged from being pulled. So I then had to weave in my ends for the S and then come back again, just picking up where I left off, again with a chain stitch, and just finishing off the S. And clearly this is the white on red. You could of course done the green on red, and I did in some of the letters. So this is just an example of 3 letters that I embroidered. I'm not going to do the whole 14 letters for you. I'm sure you can work it out. So there we have the M, the A and the S, and that finished off my list of all the letters being embroidered on the pennants. So I start off with a blank one. I then have the word Merry, then I've got a blank, and I've got the word Christmas. Note the I is actually only 3 stitches wide because it's that super slim letter, and that is the only one that's 3 wide, whereas everything else is 7 except the M, which is 9. So let's have a look at making the bunting cord. So you've now got all your pennants in line, and they are back to front because we're going to be crocheting from the right to the left. So we're going to start at the back. So with your first blank pennant, that will be the first one you're going to add in. So I'm using red here because it's Christmas, and why not? So put a slip stitch on your hook, and then you're going to chain 10. This is going to create the loop at the end that you hang the bunting up with. So you've got your chain 10, then you're going to slip stitch into the very first chain, and that forms the little loop. Next we're going to chain 10 as we start off with our bunting cord. So to attach the first pennant, you're going to do a single crochet into every stitch across the top of the pennant. So there should be 27 stitches across the top of your pennants, and you're simply going to go through with a single crochet all the way across the top. So we are attaching the blank pennant at the right hand side of your bunting. It's the one at the very end. Again, you want to keep your tension even. It just makes the whole thing look a lot better if you can maintain your tension and keep it not from pulling and so on. You don't want it too tight. So once you've got your 27 single crochets across, you're going to chain 5 for the gap. 3, 4, 5. Now we are going to attach the S, which is the last letter in the word Christmas, because remember we're joining from the right hand side. So you're going to just do a single crochet in every stitch across the top of that next pennant. So this is kind of the fun bit because we're really getting towards the end now. After you've done your last one, you're going to chain 5 for the gap between the 2 pennants and then add the A for Christmas. And again, a single crochet across the top of each one. Now, those of you who are sharp will notice that my blank at the end is white, then I have the red, and then I've got another white, which is not quite sequenced correctly, and that was because I just ran out of green. My very last pennant should have been a green, but it didn't end up being so. When you get to the very last pennant and you've added that final blank one, again you're going to now chain 10 for that end section. We're going to add the loop now. So now you're going to chain another 10, and this is for the loop. So technically it's chain 20, but I just wanted to break it down so you could see exactly what we were doing. Yeah. And then you're going to slip stitch into the 10th chain from your hook to form the end loop of the bunting cord. So you slip your hook in and just pull through, and then you're going to cut. So again here now you're going to weave in your ends, but there's your loop at the other end. The idea of putting loops up is that if you might be, if you're pinning it to your wall or hanging it somewhere, it's just sometimes easier if you have a loop. I know not all buntings do, but I wanted to make sure that this one did, because I'm actually, the way I'm using it, I'm using soft pins into my drywall and hanging it up from there. So it makes sense to have this loop. Otherwise you've actually got to pin through the cord, and I didn't want to do that. So you're just going to weave that end back down and cut it off there. And then you need to go back now to the very beginning, find your very beginning one, loop, and weave in that end as well, just to finish it off. So there you have the 2 loops at either end of your bunting. Next we're going to turn to the tassels, because we are going to be hanging a tassel at the bottom point of each pennant. So I'm cutting my yarn here. It's 8 inches or 20 centimeters long, and my tassels are red and white because, as I said, I had run out of the green. So what I'm doing is I'm taking 2 strands of red and I'm taking 2 strands of white and cutting them 8 inches long. This will be for the tassels. Next you will take your 4 strands and fold them in half, so you've got them held like that, and then with your crochet hook you're going to insert your hook from behind forwards right at the bottom. It's sometimes not so easy to find exactly where to put it through, but get your hook through. Then you're going to pull that folded piece of the 4 through and then loop the dangling tassels through that loop. And you want to be gentle here. You want to be pulling it gently and make sure that it's got even tension on the tassel, and just ease all those threads through so it looks nice. The idea of the tassels is as well that it will weigh down your bunting pennants. So now you're just going to straighten out those tassels, and they probably need a bit of a trim because they're looking a little bit raggy there. So I'll just take my sharp scissors and just gently trim a little bit off and straighten up each tassel one by one to make sure that they're looking neat and tidy. There you go. So there's the first tassel on our very first pennant. Now you just need to go along and create a tassel at the bottom of every single pennant, so that each of the 17 pennants will have a little tassel. And when you've finished, it's going to look something like this. So I hung my bunting up, I pinned it up in my apartment, and you can see it hanging here. The final length is just over 4 meters, so that's just slightly over 13 feet long. And of course you could add more or less pennants if you wanted to. This is also an optional type of project that you could do for your child, write their name on the pennant and hang it on their wall in their bedroom. I think it's a great project. There are many other ways that you could work with this, and certainly use different colors as well for different seasonal events in your family. I'm Alison. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.